Welcome aboard Divorce Dads America, The Rebuild. I'm your host, Anthony Thompson. I'm glad you're here. This is going to be an absolute ripper. When I first started building this account with Divorce Dads America, I had one of my closest friends sending me Adam's content, and I had like no followers at the time. And they were like, you need to see this stuff. You need to see what he's doing. Then again, more friends passed this stuff along to me, and I was like, yeah, this dude's dope. But I was just getting going. I had my head down. And I say that to say this, guys, when multiple people you trust keep pointing you to the same man, you pay attention. And Adam has been to the rodeo and back. He's bled. He's been through the divorce. He's built something on the other side of it. And he's one of the most direct, no excuse voices for men that I've seen and I've come across. I absolutely love what he's building. I'm honored to share some time with him today. So I'm going to say, dads, buckle up. If you want to change, you've got to change. And today is absolutely your chance. Before we get into it, I want you to hit the follow on Spotify or on Apple Podcast right now. 3 episodes a week that we're giving to you. Here's why. I cannot transform a million dads on my own. Every single time you click that button, the algorithm goes crazy and sends it to other dads that are in worse conditions than you. I know you don't think that's possible, but it is. And that's one simple thing that you can do to help another dad transform their life. And so today we have Adam Allred, and I want to dig right into it with Adam. And I want to dig into a lot of this stuff, probably questions that he may have answered before, but it's going to shift something in you today. Guys, I need you to do something right now before we even talk. I need you to take a step back. I need you to take a breath. I need you to not be a consumer. I need you to be a doer. I'm asking you to have ears to hear, my man, ears to hear. Because what this guy is about to share, I believe, is going to shift something in someone today. That is why we do this. So listen carefully. Adam, man, you have this Make Men Great Again. And I just for guys that are listening, they're maybe new to you. I don't think they are, but where did that come from and where did you get that from?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, Anthony. I'm super excited to be here, and I appreciate the work that you are doing. We need more of this, so I just want to say that out the gates. And I also just want to reiterate what you said. When I went through my divorce, it was the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in my life. And there are so many men that I'm aware of personally in my orbit that have had it far worse. So to your point that there are men out there with it worse, that is so spot on, man, that you can always find other people that are going through something tougher. And so that should be an inspiration for all of us to show up and do exactly the type of work you're doing right now. So Make Men Great Again, just it started with honestly, it's the whole social media influencing account that I have now started with me going through a divorce. I was coming out of that realizing that everything that I had been raised with in terms of my outlook, my framework, how to approach a woman, how to treat her in marriage, from family, church, school, culture, none of it worked. I did it. Like I played the script. I went along and it was one of the things that made it so hard to figure out why things weren't working because I was doing what I was supposed to do. Like I was checking those boxes off and it wasn't working. And I realized that so much of the conditioning that we get as men is just bad. It's just the absolute wrong messaging that we keep sending over and over to men. And so that was kind of the catalyst for me to starting to share social media content. When I went through my divorce, I literally had dozens and dozens of men reaching out to me. Some of them I knew personally, some of them were friends of friends. I didn't have any social media presence at all or had any intention to, but I just had guys reaching out to me like, man, you're going through divorce. Can I ask you some questions? They would tell me their experience, their journey. So much of it was similar. Sometimes it was worse what they were going through. And they were in the same boat. These were good guys that were showing up, trying to take care of business, trying to take care of their families, and just absolutely getting eviscerated in toxic marriages and then torn apart in the family courts. And that was the trigger for me to start making some social media content. And I believe that men, we have a divine and sacred role to lead and to gather together as men, and where iron sharpens iron and level each other up. And we have lost our way. We're isolated more now than we ever have before in human history. And I think there's a lot of this stuff I see when I started making content on social media. I kind of felt like I was a lone voice because I wasn't on social media very much, but pretty soon, within a short period of time of making content, a lot of guys like yourself started showing up in my orbit, in my feed, and there's a lot of men speaking on this, and I realize, like, man, we're turning this pendulum. We're getting it back, like bringing back masculinity, bringing back traditional man values, and I wanted to be a part of that, and that's where Make Men Great Again came from.
Yeah, it's rad, dude. I know your background a little bit for dads that are listening. With a lot of military guys. I know door to door sales is in there for you. Getting a company sold for several $1,000,000, huge. What did you find in those experiences that taught you about what men are capable of?
Well, I think you're capable of doing anything that you want to. Like, if you set your mind to it, and I believe in this idea of manifestation,
Yeah,
so that you can manifest, like, the external world that we operate in the simulation of life is a reflection of what's going on internally. It's always a reflection, it's a mirror. And the ability to create things, we have that ability, and we manifest things through our thoughts, through our words, and through our actions. We start to create things, and you can create almost anything that you want to create. And I've learned that through businesses, like going into markets, like my first company in Philadelphia, starting a little garbage company with a partner out there in this market that was very old and had a lot of old mafia elements to it. All of these old Italian guys running the garbage market in Philadelphia. And here we were, these two guys from Utah showing up on the scene, knocking doors with, some of our sales reps and buying carts and, picking up people's trash and just carving that out of nothing. There was nothing there that existed before in terms of that company. And we created it. And, 18 months later, we sold it off for $3.5 million. It was my first business venture. And I was just like, man, when you really focus on something, when you really commit yourself to something, there is unlimited potential inside each one of us.
that's huge, brother. I came across something that you said recently that I think will really hit with the dads that are listening. And there might be a dad who's in it in the moment. He's going through it. Maybe he's separated. Maybe he's after. But what you said here, you said something that went like this. It said the greatest threat to society is weak masculinity, and we have to own that. We can't blame it on women. We can't blame it on our problems. This is a man issue. Can you maybe take a few little moments of that? What is that? What does that mean for you? What is that? What do you want dads to hear when you say that?
I think the first thing is what you just said, we have to recognize that the state of the world around us is a reflection of us as men. And I mean that regarding women as well. There's a lot of men out there that have gone through a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, and there's bitterness towards females. And a lot of the problems that men have, they blame on women. They externalize it instead of owning it. Every woman that I know, and I've know a lot of them, I ran into a lot of them, toxic women, on some level, it was a failing of a man somewhere in their life, whether it was usually their father, whatever, fill in the blank. Someone didn't show up. They either overindulged this girl, they neglected her, they abused her, whatever it is. And we're dealing with the fruits of that. We're dealing with the lack of masculinity showing up in homes. We're dealing with the lack of masculinity showing up in culture, showing up in politics, like showing up across the board. And it's because masculinity has been under attack. And I believe it's been a concerted effort to do that. I don't think that's accidental or that's organic. I think there's been a real intelligent effort by the forces that be to keep the population, the livestock, docile and harmless. And the way you do that is you make men weak. And so when I say that I think the greatest threat to society is that the weakening of masculinity, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I think every single societal ill that we see right now stems somewhere from men not showing up, men not doing their job right.
yeah. So, what was something for you, man? Where you were like looking at it now? What was something for you that you had to expose for yourself where you weren't showing up?
Oh my gosh, the list goes on and on. And
Like,
it continues, right?
just top couple, because I'm sure what you're about to say is probably what every dad needs to hear or they're going through.
One of the biggest ones was in my first marriage. So, I got married when I was 30, and like I said, I played the script that I'd been handed. I don't fault my younger version. Yeah, he knew what he knew, and he didn't know what he didn't know. But I did it all wrong. There's so many things in my first marriage that I just did wrong, and it was easy to blame her. She was a very difficult person to be married to. She has her own issues and demons that she's working on. But when I started to like really heal from the divorce process and look back on things, and I could do so with an open mind, I can see so many areas where I just didn't do it right. I didn't show up. And that's important. That was really healthy for me to see that because one, I could stop blaming her. Victimization is a trap. It's a pit that so many of us men fall into. It never serves you. It never makes your life better. There's no value anywhere ever in being a victim. In fact, a wise man once said, "There's no situation so bad that complaining about it won't make it worse." And I've like that just really hit hard with me. And so I can look back on that first marriage, and I can say in a lot of ways, I just didn't show up the right way, and I had to own that.
Yeah. So for you being, going through a divorce, I want to just start to walk in this water for dads that are listening and uh, and what you went through. But as you were going through it, um, what did it actually feel like for you as a man when you when you got divorced? What did that feel like for you?
Well, there was different stages to it, right? So initially, it was kind of the stages of grief. If initially it was denial, she was the one pushing for the divorce at the end. I was the one fighting to keep it together, the marriage because of the kids. I was like, I
Yeah.
had that in my head. I have to stay in this for the kids, and I had also this religious conditioning that I had to be there. I had to make it work, and that didn't just go away with the divorce. I mean, I felt that poignantly throughout the whole process. Like, um, it was the hardest thing. I've done a lot of hard things in my life. Most men have. We've gone through we go through tough stuff. That was by far the hardest thing I've ever done, and it was an existential crisis. It was a faith crisis. It was a financial crisis. It was a health crisis. There were so many things that like it just broke apart my entire foundation that I had built my whole life. You
Yeah.
know, man, if you just work at something, you can make it work. That's was my thought about the marriage. You just no excuses. You keep working at it. You keep working at it. And so when I finally, like at the end, she pushed for the divorce. When I finally got on board, she reversed and said she didn't want a divorce anymore. And at that point, I could see clearly enough that this was never going to work. It was never going to work out. And so I had to be the guy to just say, no, we're doing this. I'm not going to go back into this. But it felt like everything that I had built my whole life around was being taken away from me, including my relationship with God. I've always
Yeah.
been a spiritual guy. I've always been a church going guy. I've always read my scriptures. And I had this is kind of a long story. I'll share it real. I'll try to be brief with it, but I'd had this frustration in my marriage with God because I felt like he wasn't coming through on stuff that I was asking him for. Jesus teaches, knock and it shall be opened, ask and you shall receive. And I was knocking a lot and
Yeah.
asking a
Door
lot.
door to door, baby.
Well, door to door is part of that, but I mean, in that marriage, I was knocking a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like, "Lord, help me!" And I had in my framework, I had this idea that I had to make my wife happy. That was my job. That's what my family taught me. That's what my church taught me. That's what culture taught me. That's what she thought. She thought it was my job to make her happy. I just believed that, and so I was constantly chasing this moving target, and I was constantly trying to change things about myself to make her not be upset because I thought that was my
Mm.
responsibility. And so I was asking God all the time, God, help me change this about me. Help me change this about me. And so when I went through that divorce, I was really bitter at God for a while. I didn't end my relationship with God. I knew that on some level that I was just a kid having a temper tantrum and, I'm throwing a fit and I understood that on some level, but I was pretty angry about it for months after my divorce. And I remember one afternoon I was in my new house, the house I'm in now. This is probably a year and a half after my divorce, year after my divorce. And my kids, I have 50-50 custody. The three kids were with their mother. And I was sitting in my living room and I wasn't feeling angry. I was feeling more contemplative and kind of just pondering on things. And I'd kind of gone through a lot of the pain and suffering and was kind of coming out on the other side. It was still there, but I was starting to kind of emerge out of that, feeling a little bit better about myself. And I remember just asking God, I was like, God, why didn't my marriage work? I tried everything knew how to do to make that marriage work. Why didn't you show up when I asked you to help me change things about myself? And it was one of these really just one of the most powerful spiritual experiences I've ever had in my life. God said to me, son, I never wanted you to become what she wanted you to become. And I sat with that for a long time. And it was just this light bulb that went off in my head that she was trying to change me. And all the qualities that God had given me as a man, all the things that made me a man, she was trying to cut out. And I was trying to do that too. And I was asking God to help me. And God's like, son, I'm not going to help you be weak. I'm not going to
Yeah.
help you chop off the things that make you good, the things that I've
Mm.
given you, the talents and skills that I've given you. You were asking the wrong question. And that completely flipped everything. That was like a crossroad kind of catalyst moment for me where instantaneously all the frustration that I'd felt towards God went away. I recognized that I was learning a profound lesson. And I walked away from that experience that afternoon in my living room by myself, realizing that what I believe spiritually, theologically, is that God's purpose with each one of us men is to make us the most powerful version of ourselves. And he will help us do that. I believe there's a divine force in our lives. I believe we can turn to the divine. I feel like there's miracles that happen. I feel like there's energy. There's things that come into our life that help us to do those things outside of ourselves. But God's not going to help us be weaker. We can choose to do that. We can choose to, to cut off our own wings, but God isn't going to help us do that. And I realize that. And I realize God's purpose with me, my mission as a man was to become the most powerful, biggest, fastest version of myself.
Yeah, that's huge, brother. I want to jump into this dark moment, in this dark space and dark place for you, because each and every one of these dads has been there. I guess for you, what was that darkest, lowest moment? What did it feel like, and what did it sound like? And I just I want guys to hear from you, but because you've been through, you're across the river, and I tell this guys all the time, hey, we throw you a rope so that you can get across faster than we did. And you're going to feel XYZ, and they're probably feeling that. And I always like to ask them what it feels like, but I also like to ask, what did it sound like in those moments for you?
That's a really powerful question. So, when we went through the divorce, she got everything in it. Like, so everything, all the bank accounts, the house. The only thing that I took from that divorce was my old truck and garbage bags full of clothes. And I didn't have any money. I got saddled with a lot of alimony. I got saddled with child support, even though I had the kids 50% of the time. So I couldn't afford anywhere else to go. Like, this is earlier in my business career. My businesses were just starting to kind of pick up. So I didn't have much. She left the businesses alone. I got to keep those, but she took everything else that we had. And so I was rolling the dice that my business partners and I were going to turn up and make this work. And so I moved into my grandma's attic at first. It was a little one-bedroom attic, and I had the kids with me 50% of the time, and I'm trying to build these businesses, and we were living out of garbage bags. 3 kids, myself, in a little room upstairs in my grandma's house. I'm trying to get them to school. I'm trying to get to work. I've got a little girl that's 2 years old, so I'm taking her with me to work. I'm trying to get her nap times at work. One time I was in a corporate meeting and the cops came in because she walked out into the middle of the street. My little 2-year-old, my secretaries were supposed to be watching her, and she walked out into the middle of this busy street, and they came in. It was just such an overwhelming place to be. Nothing was working. I was carrying way too much weight on my shoulders. I couldn't keep it all together. And every morning I woke up, I was sick to my stomach, like just filled with anxiety. Every night I went to bed, I didn't wanna live, like, I was hoping I would die. And all day, every day, I thought about dying. Like, I look back on this as such a weird place. I've never been like this in my whole life, but every single day, I fantasized about death. Like, I just wanted to stop existing, and the only thing really that kept me going were my responsibilities, starting first with my kids. I had other responsibilities, like my business partners, to show up and get stuff done. I didn't wanna let anybody down. But it was really just my kids that kept me going from one day to the next, because everything else I felt like was just falling apart in my life. Um, it was a dark place, and I was in that place probably for almost a year, every single day fantasizing about death all day long, just not wanting to live anymore.
Yeah, what did it sound like?
Inside, it was my internal voice. It sounded like a lot of personal criticism. It sounded like a
Yeah,
lot of victimization in my head, like, "This isn't fair. This is bullshit." Like,
yeah,
um constantly criticizing myself, constantly, like, heaping shame on myself with this internal voice, like, "Dude, you're a failure." Just talking to myself really negatively. There was a
yeah.
lot of that was going on during that time period, and I had some pretty remarkable experiences that helped me to jump out of that, but it was, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, and yet, I will say this, that has become the catalyst for everything else in my life.
Yeah.
I heard somebody once say rock bottom is a good foundation to start building on. And I realized that that's true. I didn't in the moment when I was rock bottom. It just felt pretty shitty.
Yeah.
It's like, this sucks, dude. You kind of just feeling sorry for yourself. You're getting your ass kicked. You're like, dude, this is everything I worked my whole life for, worked hard for, all the things I built up. all taken away. You lose everything and you're just kind of starting over and you're like, dude, I don't want to do this. But when you get kind of past that, you stop feeling sorry for yourself and you realize life's still going and you still got to show up. You still got responsibilities. Well, what do you do when your back's against the wall? You go forward. That's what you got to do. There was nowhere else to drop. I couldn't go any lower. So you just start moving forward and you realize, man, that was such an important blessing in a time period for me. That's when we talk about going through, I'm sure you talk about this with guys that you counsel with. I talk about this with my guys all the time. We talk about the journey of a man, and in many
Yeah.
respects, we use metaphors like the furnace of affliction or whatever, going into the darkness, the hero's journey. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
This is what it feels like. This is
Yeah.
what it sounds like, right? This is it. Like, it's easy to theorize about it. It's easy to read about it and think, yeah, the journey of a man. Da, da. And then when you're in it, you realize, oh, I had no idea, like what the furnace feels like. But you realize that everything, at least I really believe this, that everything that happens in our life is happening for a reason, and there's a value to everything. One of the most important truths I've ever learned through that process, this is probably the thing, if I could go back and tell my younger version one thing before he got married, before he went through
Yeah.
divorce, all of those things, and I wouldn't trade that. I wouldn't take that away. I'd go through that same journey again. I got 3 beautiful kids. I learned an enormous amount, but if I could go back and tell that younger version one thing, I would tell him, there's 2 things I would tell him. The first thing I'd tell him is thank you for showing up.
Mm.
You kept going. You held the line, man. You got your ass kicked. You didn't do it perfectly. You made a lot of mistakes. You lay down sometimes for a while before you got back up, but you got up. And that younger version of myself, I'm really grateful for him because he's made me who I am today. But the other thing I'd tell him is that every event that happens in our life, every event is neutral.
Yeah.
No matter how horrific it seems, it's actually just neutral. All of the meaning is assigned through us. We create the meaning out of every
Yeah.
event. That's why you can see one man go through something really horrible, another man go through the same thing. One comes out way better for it, one gets stuck in it. It's not the event that actually makes the difference. It's the meaning assigned to the event that matters. And so when I started learning that concept, which I don't think I would have ever learned any other way than going through a divorce, that all of this stuff, God was giving me an opportunity to learn from it. And I could choose not to. I could choose to feel sorry for myself. I could choose to lay down and die. We all have our free agency. But that when I started realizing, hey, God is giving me things to learn from and grow from, that became like where everything was in black and white shifted to color. Like, this is all happening for me. It's not happening to me. But that was an internal decision that I made. That was the paradigm shift for me, that these events that were happening, they were no longer happening to me. They were all happening for me. And that became the great, like, kind of awakening for me, kind of the rebirth of the phoenix from the ashes, so to speak.
Yeah. When did that? Actually, before I get in there, you mentioned a word that is one of the most common words that divorced dads hear and feel, and it's this word grief. And from a guy who's been through it, a guy who's incredible leader that's building his family, that was in that moment, what would you tell guys that are feeling those waves of grief? What would you share? How would you help them?
I would tell guys that are feeling grief not to shut it off, not to begrudge it, not to resist it, but to lean into it and embrace it. Grief is part of the factory settings of life. It means that you love something.
Yeah.
And love comes with a price tag. And that price tag is that if you lose something that you love, you're going to feel grief. And I think that's important. It's important for us to feel grief. And I feel like so often we try to avoid the negative emotions. We try to bury them as men. We try not to look at them, the things that hurt us, the things that embarrass us, whatever. We try not to look at them. There's a story, and I know I'm kind of waxing kind of scriptural, spiritual here. Maybe this is too much, like kind of God stuff, but I really feel like God
Lay it
carried
in,
me through
bro.
that.
Lay it in.
There's this profound story in the Old Testament where Moses leads the children of Israel through the through the desert to the promised land. And
Yeah.
most people are probably familiar with this story. You hear about it all over the place. But there's this point where the children of Israel are, the whole thing is a metaphor, in my opinion, for going through a divorce. So you're in bondage. You're stuck in a toxic, bad marriage. The children of Israel in Egypt, you're stuck there. God comes to you and says, there's a better way, whatever that is, some epiphany, some inspiration. Hey, we don't have to just stay stuck here forever. But to get to the promised land, a better place, there's this thing called the wilderness, which is uncertainty. It's where, it's nuance. And the children of Israel leave into the wilderness, and almost immediately after they get in the wilderness, they want to go back. They want to go back to what's familiar. I'd rather take the hell that I knew than this new hell that I don't know. So
Yeah.
they want to go back, and Moses and Aaron, they're kind of headlocking him, trying to drag him to the promised land. Well, one point in the wilderness, they start getting bit by these serpents, and they're dying. It's horrific. I mean, they're under their bedrolls, they're under their tents, their kids are dying, they're dying. These things are everywhere. And Moses does this thing where he holds up this stick with a serpent on it. And he says, if you look at this stick, if you look at this serpent, you'll be saved, you'll be healed. And it sounds really bizarre, like so many of the Old Testament stories, if you just take them literally at face value. But if you start to dive into the truth behind it, the profound psychological truths that are embedded into these stories, whether you're a believer or not, whether it literally happened or not, isn't important. What's the truth in this story? What Moses did was, it was profoundly high level psychology. He said, if you're going to be healed of the thing you're afraid of, you have to look at it. You have to
Mm.
face it. And I think a lot of that's how grief is. When I was going through my divorce and I was in that darkest place month after week, month after month of just not wanting to live anymore, I was trying to resist the pain. I was trying to
Yeah.
resist the grief. And I was doing everything. I would pray to God, God, give me just a second not to feel this way today. Just give me 20 minutes where I don't feel like shit. Just today. Just give me something. And I kept feeling that way. It didn't go away. And one morning I was in the shower at the gym just trying to get my shit together. The gym was my therapy. Every day I'd take my kids to school, get them breakfast, and I'd go to the gym, and it would kind of get me in fighting shape to face the rest of the day. And I was in the gym shower doing what I always did, praying to asking God, please help me get through this day. Help me just kind of hold it together. Please give me a break. Take this pain from me for just a second. And it was another one of these powerful experiences, spiritual experiences, where God said, I heard this voice in my head. It's in my head, but it was a voice that came into my head and said, son, if I take away the pain, I take away the learning.
Yeah.
And I realized that that pain was divine. I realized God was giving me something important to learn from. It was like I was the kid that didn't want to eat my broccoli, and God's like, son, you got to eat your broccoli. This is your broccoli, and it's good for you. And when I realized that, that was the shift for me to stop wishing away my grief, stop wishing away my pain, and realize there was something divine in this. And so I started shifting the way that I approached it, and it took a lot of effort. And instead of asking God to take it away, I started expressing some gratitude for it. I was faking it at first, but I was like, God, thank you for giving me this. I'm learning a lot. It's giving me deeper humanity. It's expanding who I am. And I'm strong enough to do this. I've done this for months now. I can do it another day. I know I can do it another day. And if I have to do this forever, I'm strong enough to do this. And I started finding my masculinity inside of me, that I could face up to this, and that I didn't need to hide from this pain anymore, that I could embrace it and I could welcome it and I could carry it with me as something that was sacred to me. I know this sounds really bizarre and maybe a little too much into deep waters, but it was interesting. It took me a couple of weeks before I really started feeling gratitude. Like I was like, I'm really grateful that I'm having these
Yeah.
experiences. And as soon as I started feeling gratitude, as soon as I fully embraced what I was going through and and appreciated it, it went away.
Yeah.
Ironically, like I went from being like every day wanting to die to like, suddenly the birds were chirping, the sun was out, like life was good again. And it was full of opportunity that I couldn't see when I was stuck in my pain trying to fight it and trying to resist it. So that idea of looking at the snake, that the idea that grief is connected to this experience that we go through in life, and it's an important part of this life to be able to feel grief, to be able to feel all the human emotions, even depression. I remember telling God, thank you that I feel depressed. Who's grateful that they feel depressed? Nobody.
Yeah.
Depression sucks. But grateful that I could feel some depression in this, grateful that I could have this human experience, that I was alive to feel these things, as painful as they were. Start believing in myself that I was strong enough to carry these bricks in my backpack every day, that I could do this, and I could do this without feeling sorry for myself. That was just the catalyst for everything. It just changed the entire way I oriented myself towards my marriage that I'd come out of, and towards my future, what was available to me. And now I've learned that lesson, and I'm so grateful that I have. This is the point of it, I guess, is like when God said, I take away the pain, I'll take away the learning. Because I went through that, because I learned this process, now when other things in life happen, which they always do, I can fall back on that now because I've learned something that's just into my DNA, that life is happening for me, it's not happening to me, and constantly looking for the things to be grateful about in those
Yeah.
experiences. And it's completely changed my entire trajectory as a human.
Yeah. As you were going, getting I kind of talked to guys about sort of getting on the train and that first, when you're trying to move a train and it's so heavy, there's so much there's so much activity and action that you have to put toward just getting the freaking train moving. Once it gets moving, it's good. But when you're in that season, You're coming out of it. You've got this business. You got your daughter that's coming with you to work. You've got all these thoughts every day that are just overwhelming, tormenting, sickness to your stomach. And you're doing everything you can. You're living in your grandma's house. Like you have all of these things all at once. You're trying to push this train as hard as you can to get some kind of movement. What were some like actual things that started that you started to do that worked? Was it a person? Was it something you listened to? Like what was the things that you began to turn those victim things into you thinking more like a victor?
Another great question, Anthony. I appreciate it. The first one I have to say was God for me, for
Yeah.
sure. Like I had to keep that relationship, that connection going. That was the biggest force of good in my life at that time. But the other things were just things like more simple things, like just getting my ass in the gym. Like we call it exercise. I called it during that time period exercising demons. Like people would ask me,
Yeah.
why are you training so hard? I was doing Ironmans. I was doing, long distance training. It was my therapy.
Wow.
Dude, what are you training for? Sometimes I wasn't training for anything. I'd just be like, dude, I'm training for life. This is cheaper and better than therapy. I'm just showing up to the gym. Just getting
Yeah.
my ass in the gym was
Yeah.
like one of those things that I held on to even in my darkest periods of time because I realized I needed to just get out and do something. Really trying to wake up every morning and seize the day, but also this idea of moving the train is profound because there's this whole thing of inertia and like getting something that's not moving to start moving is an enormous amount of effort and work to start getting it going. To your point, physics, once it starts going, it's much easier to maintain an object in motion. But there's also times and seasons in your life where you don't need to necessarily move it forward. I think there's
Mm.
times when you can recognize the best that you can do is just show up. That's it. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to conquer the world right now. There's
Yeah.
times and seasons in your life when you just have to kind of circle the wagons a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to take my hits like a man. I'm going to
Yeah.
just keep showing up every day. I'm not going to quit. Uh, and maybe it doesn't feel like I'm winning right now. Maybe it doesn't feel like the needle's moving at all. And the best I
Yeah.
can do is just kind of to just take my hits right now. But that's not a place you want to stay. But I think there's a time and place. You got to be patient with yourself when you're going through this process, and you got to have grace with yourself because you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's going to be a process. This whole refiner's fire thing that I'm talking about right now, it takes it takes time. It doesn't just
Yeah.
magically happen. And so
Yeah.
these epiphanies and these moments that you get where you're like, oh, I finally figured something out. You're like, that didn't happen accidentally. It happened because you showed up for those first 6 months. You kept getting out of bed, you kept going to the gym, and now suddenly the light bulb went off. It's because you just kept showing up.
Yeah.
90% of success is just showing up.
Yeah.
Just getting out of bed, showing up, doing the things that you say you're going to do, keeping commitments to yourself, getting after it. So, another big one though was, and this is really important. I can't overstate this. One of the worst things that we get conditioned, speaking of all the bad conditioning that we get as men, one of the things that I was conditioned with, and I think most men are, is that once you get married, once you get a career, your friends are disposable. These brothers, your buddies that you've grown up with, that you spent time with. You have a wife now, so you don't have time for them anymore. You have a career now. You've matured past them, and you see them every once in a while. You send Christmas cards and occasional texts or whatever. I fell into that trap. My
Mm.
wife saw my friends. My first wife saw my friends as a threat. She didn't like them. She saw them as annoying, obnoxious, immature, whatever else. I believed my job was to make her happy. So I just, over time of that marriage, spent less and less time with my buddies. What I've realized now, one of the important lessons coming out of that is that, a man has three families. He has a family he's born into, the family he creates with his wife, his woman, and then has a family that he chooses, which is the brothers that he gets to go through this life with. And I had really good friends. And when
Yeah.
I went through my divorce, even though I lost consistent contact with most of them, those guys just started showing up. They, yeah, I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but I'll never forget those guys. They just, he started calling me, started showing up to my house to move stuff. Like, hey man, I'm going to take you out to lunch. Guys that I hadn't talked to in years, like heard about what was going on, and they just showed up. And I'll never forget them. And I will never make that same mistake again. I realize that, like, hey, whatever happens in the future, whether I'm remarried now, but at the time, if I get married again, if not, whatever, but I will never trade my friends for anything. Not a woman, not anything else. My buddies are my family. And if they don't like a girl I'm dating, she's gone. If she doesn't like them, she's gone. Like they're each a reflection of me in some way. And I can't overstate how profoundly important that was to me that my friends showed up when I needed them. I really leaned heavily on them during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, bro, just sharing that. Thank you for just, letting that rip because those are the real moments, man. These are the ones where, at least on my side of the table, mine vanished, brother. There was zero. It was me, myself, and I, and that wilderness was for real. And thank God that you had people that made that phone call and did those things. And those are obviously that there's something in you, brother, that was obviously um it was being capped. And the biggest thing I would say is the leadership because of the impact that you have. And if I wanted to take a man down and I can look at the other men that are going to follow him, that's what I'm going to do. And to see, obviously what you're doing now and where you are versus sort of probably where you were in that scenario, I could see a very big, you know, a limitation that anyone, enemy, whatever you want to call it, will want to have in your life because of that impact that you now are able to have with others. And I know you're a guy that is doing a lot and you're a business owner and a dad and you're not a guy that's sitting on the couch. That's not the type of people that are on this podcast anyway. But one of the things that I do notice, especially with business owners and guys that are, sort of scaling the ladder at that capacity, is that sometimes, and this is myself included, we can be so action orientated that we don't know how to keep still or sit still. And I guess I like to throw that back to you for somebody that is so movement orientated and action driven. What was that like for you to be still and be quiet even with your own self? What was that like?
So yeah, that's first of all, it's super important what you're asking about right now, and also just a reminder of men going through it and they have it worse. You just described that. I had buddies you didn't. You were going through something worse than I was going through because my buddies were huge for me. And it's just a reminder, guys, for everybody who's listening to this podcast that there's somebody that is in a worse situation than you are, and you have an ability to help them, even just if it's a kind word. Sometimes that's all you need to hear. Sometimes people just say something nice to me, you know, gas me up, and I'd carry with that with me the whole day. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, "Man,
Yeah.
that meant something
I'll
to me
take
because
it.
I'm at rock bottom right now." Like,
I'll take it,
I don't
dude.
have any confidence, I don't have any self-respect, and somebody says something nice to you, and they don't even probably think it means anything, and you're, like, carrying it around the rest of the day like, "Man, that was a little boost to my wings," that just gave me a little lift, and
Yeah.
I needed it today. So, I think God uses angels all the time, but I think those angels are us. I think they're other humans that show up in capacities where they can do good. So I find that, but to go back to your question about stillness, that's again going back to this whole idea of being able to sit with your grief, not to wallow in it, not to
Yeah.
ruminate on it, but to allow it to exist without
Yeah.
resentment, without begrudging it. And you can only do that if you do sit with it. But we have an inclination as men, it's like our knee jerk reaction that when something hurts us, we try to bury it. We don't want to
Mm,
look at it. And that usually looks like, especially for action oriented men, to just stay busy, and
mm.
then we never actually deal with this, and we bury this pain, and it turns into trauma because trauma is just the story we tell. There's no such thing as trauma, I don't believe. Trauma is just pain that we create a story around that creates trauma. Well, we have this story, we bury it, and then so many men are going through life and they're just digging out the weeds, and they're not getting to the root of the problem because they've buried these roots beneath the earth, and they've stacked more earth on top of it. And so they're white knuckling it through life. They have
Yeah.
road rage, they're impatient, they're yelling at their kids, they can't figure out why. For most of us, it's because we haven't really sat long enough to be able to dig up the roots and see where this pain is coming from, where this behavior is being manifested from. And so, like, for me, I have to do that every single day. Every single morning I get up, I spend my first 2 hours every single morning. I'm awake before anybody else is awake in the house, and that's my time where I meditate, I do ice baths, I read my scriptures, I listen to music. It's usually dark. I have my candle lit. It's just me in my office. It's my little holy place in my house where I can sit with everything that's gone on in my life and do so in a way that I can appreciate what's happening,
Yeah.
I try to anyways. I'm not perfect at this, but I try to sit with whatever's going on in my life and find gratitude in it as part of my morning practice. And then also be able to project what I want into the day. And that's how I start every single day without fail. I have to like now. That's part of it. But it's also just finding moments throughout the day where you just you try to at least for me, I try to keep myself open and listening to that divine voice. I call that voice God. People can call it whatever they want. But um one example of that, I think maybe this will answer the question is and I've shared this before in a couple of other podcasts, but when I was in that really tough period, trying to manage everything, I was taking my kids to school one day and my son, um, he was 7 or 8 at the time. He said something that just set me off, and I unloaded all of my frustration on him. I was a horrible dad in that moment. I just
Yeah.
laid out, and he didn't deserve it. He didn't say anything wrong. He wasn't being disrespectful. I don't even remember what it was, but it triggered some, explosion out of me. I drop him off at school. I see him walking into the classroom with his shoulders slumped, and I realized like all the bricks I'd been carried, I just dumped on my boy, and
Yeah.
now he was carrying it. And I'm driving away from the school, and I'm just like, dude, I'm the worst dad. That voice is coming in like, you're a failure. You're a loser. You just like ruin your son's day. I'm beating myself up. And I heard this voice again, and God said, son, just skip this part. And I think this is the idea of being still. Like I heard something and I pulled over to the side of the road right away. It was so surprising to me that I heard this,
Mm.
just skip this part. I pulled over to the side of the road and what? And it was like, yeah, son, just skip this part. And I sat with that for a long time. I was going to go to work and I ended up late to work. I sat there on the side of that road for probably 30 minutes, just kind of contemplating to skip this part. And what I feel like God was telling me is like, son, you can just skip the whole shame part, this part of beating yourself up. Just get to the good part. Like, you're not doing me any favors by proverbially flogging yourself, by making yourself beating yourself up. That's not redemptive at all. It doesn't do me any favors. God's telling me it doesn't do myself any favors. Just skip this part and get to the part where you learn.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised by that, but I forced myself to do that day. I was like, okay, I was going to ruin my whole day. I just ruined my son's day. My whole day is ruined now. Instead, I forced myself to stay positive. I went to work. I came back. I picked up my son. Um, I had a heart to heart, man to man conversation with him. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him where I was coming from. I apologized. I told him I'd never do that again. And I took him to go do his favorite thing and get his favorite treat. And it became this really cool bonding experience with me and my son that day.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part was I didn't have to feel like a piece of shit all day long. I could just get to the part where I learned. And I've never
Yeah.
talked to my son like that since. And that was part of that stillness is just listening and sometimes you got to pull the car over. You just got to sit for a minute and open up your heart and open up your mind and listen and feel things. And I think that's where we can hear that divine voice that can come to us and help us navigate through these really, really tough stretches, these wildernesses that we have to pass through.
Yeah.
I
That's
think it's
good, dude.
an important part of being a man is knowing how to sit still and sit with your experiences, sit with your demons, sit with your pain and your grief.
Yeah. I want to walk down another really dark road that every dad knows about. Um, and it's that road. Oh man, I'm just thinking about it now. um, it's the road when you drop your kids off and or they get picked up and you're at home or whatever, and kids aren't there no more. What was that like for you? Some of those first times. Well, what did you hear? And then what did you do wrong, and what would you have done different for that?
Well, I know you feel this, and you're right. This is ubiquitous for every father that cares about their kids that goes through a divorce. I mean, it literally feels like a piece of you is getting cut off every time your kids leave. I mean, they are you, they're a part of you. And so when they're gone, it feels like you're missing your arms, like emotionally, spiritually, like
Yeah.
psychologically. Uh, yeah, it's a tough, it still is to this day. I've been divorced for almost 8 years now. And every time those kids leave, I have two other kids with my wife now. But every time those kids leave, it's always painful. It's always sad, always lonely for me to some extent. I think I just had to accept that early on. I just realized that was how it was going down. I couldn't control that.
Yeah.
The only thing I fought for in divorce court was 50-50 custody. That was the best I could hope for, and their mother's a good mother to them, so it wasn't like they were going to an abusive situation. But I just had to accept that, and I think I did early on. I just had to feel the pain. It just
Yeah.
hurt, and it still does. It still does.
Yeah. Do you do I walk through guys sometimes of different things to obviously it comes and it goes and you're feeling it and a lot of guys will go into, sort of numbing behaviors or, distractions or what are the things? I mean, were there things that you noticed you were doing to try and do that? And then were there other things that you replaced it with that would help a dad that's going through that sort of stuff now?
I tried a lot to bury it, yeah, like, to just try and keep busy about with the kids, when I didn't have the kids.
Yeah.
It actually has turned into a pretty cool situation for me where, I can feel the grief of not having my children with me. They're the best thing I've ever done with my life, hands down. I've created a lot of businesses, I've done a lot of cool things in my life. Creating humans, having children, raising them is the greatest work, greatest return on investment that I've ever had in my entire life. And so, just kinda sitting with that and being okay to feel that loss when they weren't with me and just being okay, this is just how it feels, and I'm allowing that to exist and not resist it. But to really, like, in those weeks, every other week where I don't have the kids, to lean into work, like, that's where I'm grinding, taking care of stuff. And now when I get my kids, one of the blessings, part of this one of the silver linings in all of this is that I am so present with my kids when I get them now
Yeah.
than when I had them all the time. You can take them for granted. Life is you get busy and you get into
Yeah.
life, and it's really easy to take those kids for granted. Now I don't. Like, I get my kids, "All right, it's game time, guys. Like, I'm here. I'm going to all your practices. I'm going to all
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
games. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want anybody else to drive you. I wanna drive you so we can have dad time and I can talk with you." I drive them to school every morning. And so in some ways, you can always find the silver lining in everything, and that's been a silver lining for me with the kids is that I'm a better dad now. I wasn't a bad dad before, but I'm a much more present, more focused, better dad now when I have my kids because I only have them for 50% of the time. And so I
Yeah.
make that time count. I make that time compound. If I can't have them for every day of the year, I'm going to make it feel like I have them for every day of the year because the time I have with them, I'm going to really pour into them and I'm going to just give them everything I got. And that's been a real blessing. And it's kept us super close in this. And so, any dad out there, a lot of dads don't have 50-50 custody. Again, talking about guys who have it worse. Some guys get to see their kids every other weekend. You know, when you're with those kids, all the whatever you're feeling, you got to set that aside for that time with the kids. You got to just be present with them, and they've got to be priority number one. And that
Yeah.
will pay huge dividends. And I think that's intensely healing as well to be able to have
Yeah.
that time with your kids where you just focus on them, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. What was it for you? You're walking through this divorce lane, different I mean, I know there's a lot of different seasons and things. I always like to try and ask too, as you're walking through that, one is, what was a piece of advice that was actually really good? And what was a piece of advice that was really bad that you can remember?
Oh man. Um Let me think on the best advice I got. I got a lot of good advice. A lot of guys that had gone through divorces, it wasn't even so much advice as it was perspective that I got,
Mm,
and I think that's really what the crux of your podcast is that there's a better there's light at the end of the tunnel.
yeah.
Sometimes you can't see it, but there is. There's always light. Life comes in seasons. It can get dark for a while, and then it always gets light, just like day and night. You gotta go through the different seasons of life. But a lot of guys just reminded me, "Hey, man, it's gonna get better. Just don't quit. Don't give up. Keep going because it'll get better."
Yeah.
And to anybody listening right now, I can testify of that. My life is the best that it's ever been right now. I'm the happiest I've ever been, and it doesn't mean it's not messy. I only have my kids 50% of the time. There's still pain, there's still grief,
Yeah.
there's still stress dealing with an ex and who has a different idea of how things should go. It's not easy, um, but it is the best it's ever been. And life, it gets better. For bad advice, I had a lot of people telling me when I was going through the divorce who weren't privy to it because, the things that you deal with your spouse are usually generally pretty private. And I was pretty private about it. I didn't really talk to any of my buddies about it. I had like one or two buddies actually that I could kind of talk to a little bit during that time period. We are going through something similar, but you usually hold those cards pretty close to your chest.
Yeah.
And so when you get a divorce, most people don't realize what you're going through and they don't understand the journey that you've been through already in that marriage. And so I had a lot of people showing up that were telling me, some people very close to me, and they was well intended, but they were telling me to make it work. And I think that's a great thing to, like, to build your life around, a mentality that you don't quit, you keep
Yeah.
working at things. It's important, but there's always um, a counterweight to that. And that
Mm.
is there are times and seasons where you have to let things go. It's not working and you've given it everything you've had,
Yeah.
and you got to be able to let things go. And that was that marriage. I had to let that go. That was the hardest thing that I've ever done because I did feel like like I felt like a failure. And when people would show up and tell me, "Bro, what are you doing? Get back and work, make it work." I remember one of
Yeah.
my cousins, she reached out to me, text message, and just kind of was blasting me about like abandoning my family. And she had no idea what I was actually going through, and she was all this kind of judgment being heaped on me while I'm drowning, like, I feel like I
Yeah.
can't even keep my
Yeah.
head above the water, and now here's my cousin putting a shoe on my head, pushing my head under the water, throwing judgment. She was friends with my ex-wife, so she only heard her story, I wasn't talking about it, and so she was thinking, whatever she was thinking, but she felt like it was her place to text me and tell me how I was failing my family, and um, that was pretty hard, and that's some pretty bad advice. I
Yeah.
think if you've given everything you have and, in a relationship, it takes 2 people to make a relationship work, and if only one person's showing up, you're never gonna make that relationship work. It doesn't matter how hard one person tries, if the other person isn't committed to it, it's not gonna work, and most
Yeah.
people outside of the relationship don't understand what that dynamic is like, and so it's easy for them to pass judgment, it's easy for them to give, you know, trite advice, like, "Just keep working on it. You guys can make it work." And you're like, dude, you really have no idea what the last 8.5 years have been like and how hard I've tried to make this work and how it just keeps getting worse and worse. At some point, you gotta just say, "Look, this isn't working, and we gotta own
Yeah.
that and figure out how to move on."
Yeah. Let me jump into a couple of little dad moments here before I kind of land this plane. You're making making dads great again. You've got bunch of kids, and you're a busy man with business, and I know that probably speaks to business guys that are listening, and a lot of high level executives that are listening, and they got schedules and time and 50-50 splits, and they're trying to manage those things. And I know you said before that, like, hey, when I'm present, I'm present. And I say this to guys that are in our community. I say, look, man, like, the 50-50 sucks and it blew my mind. But what you said, and what I've also done and preach as well, is your full presence of when your children will be there will be far greater than your micro moments that you had when you were married and you were kind of non-existent. So you actually can double down on this time that you have with your kids. And I want to kind of lean into that because I think it'd be helpful for dads to hear some really like practical things that you do with the different maybe ages of your children that have been really impactful as a masculine man building with their children, of some of those things that you've started to do that have been really empowering for your kids as well as for you. What would that what have you done, and how would that help dads as with their kids?
Yeah, on a practical, level, one big thing is every single morning now when I have the kids, I make them breakfast, and I make them
Yeah.
a healthy breakfast. It's eggs, sourdough bread, some avocado, some bacon. Like, I'm a chef in that kitchen, and I never
Yeah.
made breakfast before. I don't even eat breakfast, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm just making it for the kids. But every morning they wake up, they're getting ready, I'm making them breakfast, and then we all sit around the table. I usually have my Spotify playlist playing some happy music for us, like, and we're talking about stuff. We're getting ready for the day. The whole family's there. The 2 littles are there. My wife is there. My kids love my wife, by the way. They view her as a mother. They call her mom. It's all absolutely amazing. She's the best human being I've ever met in my entire life. Speaking again about how things can just get better. The contrast between my first marriage and my second marriage is night and day. And another one of these,
Mm.
this is off topic, but another one of these silver linings is because I went
Mhm.
through a really tough first marriage, it prepped me in so many ways to learn and execute better in my second marriage.
Yeah,
And maybe even more importantly than that, it taught me never to take my wife now for granted because I know what I have. I know
yeah,
how amazing she is because I can contrast a really bad marriage with a really amazing marriage. But that's one of the first things is just how we start the day off. I start the day off every morning with my kids, unless I'm the rare occasions I'm traveling for work. I'm there making
what's the
breakfast.
age gaps?
So my oldest is 14. Then I have a 12-year-old, I have an 8-year-old, and then we have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old now.
Okay,
So yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, so we're all together, and I think that's huge. I drive him to school every day, so I take him, I talk to him on the way to school, we listen to
Yeah,
music. Sometimes we're memorizing scriptures or poems or whatever else. We have conversations. I pick him up every day from school, so I've just worked my work schedule around that, and I have a
yeah,
lot of flexibility being I own my own businesses that I can do a lot of my work on the road. I can do phone calls and emails and texts while I'm taking care of stuff. So that's really important for me is I'm there every morning before they go to school. I take them to school. I pick them up every day from school, have conversations with them on the way home.
yeah,
I show up for every single one of their practices, every single one of their events. Sometimes we have to divide and conquer when there's conflicts of schedules, so sometimes I'm not at all of them, but I'm always at one of them. I'm always
yeah,
showing up. And then another thing we just do as a family, like we just spend we do a lot of trips, we do a lot of those big things, but just the day-to-day stuff every night we circle the wagons and we come back together as a family and we play games. My kids love Sorry, they love Boggle, they love Uno, so we play those almost every night, and then we'll watch a show together. And then one of the ways it's been really I don't remember ever doing this, and when I had them 100% of the time in my first marriage, and now I can't
yeah,
not do this. Is I go to my three oldest kids' bedrooms when they're going to bed, and I sit on their bed with each one of them for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I talk to them, tickle their back, just have them tell me about their day. It's my favorite time of the whole day is at
yeah,
night when I'm just there with my kids, when we're all together as a family, everybody's under one roof. It feels so damn amazing, feels complete, and then I'm just spending this time with them just one-on-one. Those are the day-to-day things, and then, of course, we do fun things as a family, camping, fishing, take the kids on a trip to Mexico or something like that. I try to always, we always try to have fun things that we're looking forward to as a family. We're all gonna go do together. But I just think those day-to-day things, it's just a total different priority when I have my kids. I'm the one
yeah,
taking them to school. I'm the one picking them up. I'm the one taking them to practice. I'm the one taking them home from practice. I'm the one every night, playing games with my wife with me, us as a family, playing games with them, watching a little Stranger Things or something like that, and then, sitting with them every night before they go to bed and talking to them. And to your point earlier, it compounds. You make up the difference for that time you lose. And your kids will know that and they will remember that for their entire lives, how their dad showed up with the time they had. And so it may feel like you're losing something, but if
yeah,
you can really focus in on this, if you can get, I don't want to say get past the pain, but if you can learn how to manage the grief and the pain and be present with those kids, it will heal your own soul and it will make up for the lost time that you didn't have with the kids.
yeah. Yeah, I believe that, man. I think when you are doing those little things that you're doing, it absolutely compounds, and it's far greater than I look back for my own self, and it was just these micro moments where I wasn't really there, or it was just off in other ways, and to the dads that you can be there and you have that flexibility to do those things, like Adam said, it's like, yo, double down and do them because I know for me in my mind, I just kept looking at the time that I wasn't going to have. And then I felt more and more like a failure instead of looking at the time that I had to double down on and stack those things of those wins and those times and those moments. And that's what you have to build, forward to, which is I hear a lot, with what you're doing with the games and the pickups, man, and just the courage and the leadership that you're having in your family. And I just want to put one more thing your way here, dude, before we land this thing. And I always like to finish this off with just kind of a guy sort of that's listening. And so I'll say it like this, Adam. There's a dad that's listening right now who wants to change, and he needs to change, but he doesn't know where to start. And honestly, he's not sure he even has what it takes. Like probably you and I were both sitting there as well, like just in the middle of the darkness. I guess for you, Adam, what would you say to that guy, man?
It's a great question. I get this all the time and I talk about this all the time. And I think this is probably the most important question of the whole podcast. What do we do with it? we've talked a lot about what it is, what it feels like, what we've been through, but what do you do with it when you're in it? And I think the first thing that I tell any man that I speak to about this is you first have to decide what is it that you want.
Yeah.
What is it that you want? Get clear on that, and that's not something you just think about listening to a podcast one time or driving to work. You got to sit with that and really decide what is it that you want with the rest of your life. When I went through my divorce, I was 40. So I was like, half my life is over. But I got this second half. And it's kind of going back to what you're talking about, focusing on what you have or don't have. I was so focused on what I didn't have that first half, feeling like that was a loss, that
Yeah.
became, surprise, surprise, I'm depressed. Man, I'm full of anxiety, anger, resentment, bitterness, whatever else, because I was focusing on the things that I'd lost. And when I shifted that to saying, man, I got 40 years of life left in me, maybe more than that, who knows? But I got the second half of life. I had this really powerful heart to heart with God one night, talking to him for about 4 hours at this point, I'd moved into my parents' house. I was living in their
Oh,
basement
great.
before I'm in my house. Yes. So I was living in their basement, a little bigger than the one bedroom attic that I was living in. And I had this heart to heart with God, and I went through what I wanted my second half to look like. And I had 3 things that I really wanted for my second half of life. These were the 3 things, and I laid them out, had this conversation. So I got really clear. This is my second half. This is the biggest bullet points I want the second half to look like is this.
Yeah.
And I own that. And then the other thing, so first you got to if you don't, it's like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. She asked, which road should we take? The Cheshire Cat says, well, where are you trying to go? She says, I don't know. And then he says, well, then any road is going to do. And that's where so
Yes.
many men get stuck. There's all these different crossroads. They're at a crossroads. They don't know which one to take. They get hung up on whether they're going to make the right decision or not. And then they get stuck in complacency. And that's really the trap. It's not making the wrong decision. You can course correct that. And in fact, I don't even know that there is wrong decisions in life. There's just different opportunities, different experiences, and different things to learn. Um, but you have to pick a road. You have to pick a lane. What is it that
Yeah.
you're trying to work towards? So that's priority numero uno for a man to start getting his life together is define what you want the rest of your time to look like. If you could wave a magic wand, if you could see what that guy looks like in 20 years, what does he look like? What is he doing? What have you built? Get really crystal clear on that. Just pick out a couple of things that you want your life to look like. And then you have to surround yourself with good guys that are doing the same thing. Um, to me, it's about having a brotherhood around you. And for a lot of guys, they don't have friends. They don't have close friends. And that's okay. You can do that now with the day and age we live in. You can surround yourself with mentors that you never meet. Like that was one of the things I had good friends, but one of the things I really leaned to heavily during that time period, and I still do to this day, is I try to constantly surround myself with people that I want to learn from. And most of these people, most of my mentors are people I've never met and probably never will meet. Some of them have died. They're books I read, authors that I read. But I try to surround myself with good influences of men who have done things that I want to do
Yeah.
and try to get as much of that energy in my life as I can. And if you can get proximity to that, build a tribe of brothers around you, guys you meet at the gym, guys you meet at church, guys you work with, build some camaraderie there that's hugely healthy for a man's psychology. And massive benefit for him becoming a better man is being around other guys that are trying to level up and get better as well. But in the absence of that, just surround yourself with good books, good podcasts, constantly fill your head with light and with more knowledge and insight. And you'll see it will just start to shape the entire way you perceive the world. It's not a quick fix. It's not going to happen overnight, but you do that for a few months. You do that for a year. You do that for a couple of years, and your entire outlook on the world is different. You're moving
Yeah.
differently. You're thinking differently. You're acting differently. And so it's getting clear on what you want and then surrounding yourself with a good group of guys that can help carry you through that journey, that are part of that process. And I think those, to me, are the 2 biggest things that I have done and that I encourage guys to do to start really getting their lives together.
Yeah. Who's a couple of the mentors and books that you would say for divorced dads or for you in particular that really like caught your attention and was helpful for you?
Well, I lean a lot into I mean, I love Joe Rogan. I listen to
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. He's not really, the divorce guy. That's not what he talks about, but I just find that high level conversation where you're listening to somebody talk about something that's brilliant. He gets these experts on there. That alone just changes the way that I think about my own problems. Just talking, and you hear some of their experiences and journeys. So hearing about other people's experiences in Rogan's platform is great for that. He brings on phenomenal guests. I really, like Jordan Peterson a lot. I used him a lot for how do I orient myself psychologically towards the things that were happening in my life.
Yeah.
There's a woman named Byron Katie. She's phenomenal. She does a lot of this coaching. She's been doing it forever. So I've read some of her books. I think
Yeah.
she's fascinating and brilliant. Um, Man's Search for Meaning is probably the best book that I've ever read besides scripture.
Yeah.
Victor, Frankl, where he talks
Yeah.
about going through the concentration camps and how you get to create meaning and like the experiences is that idea that everything is neutral. He doesn't say it exactly like that in the book, but that's a lot of the takeaway is like going through here's a guy that went through the worst that life could throw at him,
Yeah.
in concentration camps, his family they die in concentration camps. He's tortured. Everything's taken away from him, and he comes out of it like a better human being for it. And so when you find those types of stories, just read about historical figures. Every single person that any guy listening to this that they admire, if they study their life, they're going to find that that person went through a lot of really hard things. And even though it may not be the exact same scenario, the same principles apply to it. So you can extrapolate so much learning from just following other people's journeys and the experiences they've gone through. Like we're doing on this podcast, just sharing our experiences with guys is a huge for at least me listening to these types of podcasts. I listen to these types of podcasts all the time. Um, because they totally reorient myself and get me back in fighting shape. Man, I'll get done listening to a good podcast. I'm like, okay, all right, God, bring it on. I'm ready for another day.
Yeah.
I'm ready for some more challenges. I can do more. I'm stronger than I
Yeah.
think I am. But you got to surround yourself by influences. We operate in this life on outdated programming. And so this is something I coach my guys on all the time. You have these three things that we get stuck in. I call it the triangle trap. You have the primitive brain, which is the natural operating system for each of us men, which is going to optimize, see everything as a threat, optimize for comfort and convenience. That's our primitive brain. Then you have
Yeah.
outdated programming, all this stuff that we've been inundated by family, friends, school, whatever else, the echo chambers we've been in, the things we've read. And then you have this world of entropy, of resistance. And those three things keep men trapped in this very small place a lot of times, keep us stuck. One of the biggest ways to start to change that is just to change your programming. We're basically, in my opinion, biological technology. Like we operate on programming. So you can literally rewrite your programming. Most men just try to
Yeah.
discipline themselves into changing. They try to white knuckle it. Okay, I don't want to be mad anymore, so I'm not going to be mad. And then it doesn't work because you haven't changed the way that you think. You haven't changed your programming. But when you can start like feeding your brain with new programming, your entire outlook starts to change. And so, as much as you can just inundate yourself with new software updates uh, towards what you want, like, what is
Yeah.
it that I want to be? Like, you have to be clear about that. What kind of man do I want to be? And then just flood your brain with as much of that as you can get. It will naturally start to change your behavior quicker than anything you can do with discipline.
What's your thoughts on self-talk?
Oof, I'm glad you hit that one because I think that's probably the most important. Um, this is Jordan Peterson. You have to talk to yourself like you're somebody you like.
Mm.
You have to talk to yourself like you're somebody you're responsible for. It sounds odd, but I look at myself now kind of in third person. There's like my
Yeah.
consciousness, the higher voice, and then there's this kid that's this avatar Adam. And I try to make sure this higher voice has a lot of grace for this kid, this boy inside this biological construct.
Yeah.
Like just talking to myself like I like myself, talking to myself like I talk to my kids. When my kids make a mistake, do I shame them? Do I tell them they're a loser? No, I just say, "Hey, what do we learn from this mistake? How do we get better?" I try to have that coach voice in my head. So I don't try to pretend like I don't screw up. We all screw up, and that's important to recognize that. It's important to see
Yeah.
that. What's not important, going back to that story where I dropped my kid off at school, is beating yourself up. I was conditioned that I was supposed to do that from church. I had this conversation with my mom the other day. She was talking about how she has this group of women from church come over to her house, and she's like, a lot of them just have this internal negative voice, this voice of shame, and they don't feel like they're worthy. I don't know where it comes from. I'm
Yeah.
like, really, mom? You don't know where it comes from?
Yeah.
I was like, I know where it comes from. And she's like, where? And I was like, from church, mom. I was raised with that. I didn't realize that my biggest limiting belief was a lack of worthiness until I was 40 because I've gone through this system that you raised me
Yeah.
in with good intentions. My parents are amazing. I'm not saying anything negative about them. They were the best parents I could have asked for, but they raised me in a system that constantly reinforced this idea that we're not worthy, that we're
Yeah.
bad, that we're naturally bad, we're naturally fallen. And so no wonder people go around thinking they're terrible people when they constantly get told they're terrible people. And that voice is what reinforces all of that. So when you can start to take ownership of that, you can start to change the way you talk to yourself and
Yeah.
start to see yourself as a little 2-year-old kid that you love instead of this messed up whatever, and you start to say, man, I love you, dude. I know you're not perfect. I know you're messy, but bro, I love you and I'm
Yeah.
proud of you. And I see what you're trying to do. You screwed up there, man. And I talk to myself like this. I'll be like, bro, you screwed up back there. Like you did it wrong, but I know what you were trying to do. And you're a stud, dude. Good work for trying. Let's get better. What do we learn from this? That's how I try to talk to myself now. That has been a huge change in my life when I stopped using the default voice that just constantly beat myself up over every mistake that I made. And instead, I started talking to myself like I liked myself, I was responsible for myself, and I was trying to coach myself. And that's made a
Yeah.
huge change in everything.
Yeah, that's huge, man. Scriptures will say death and life is in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And so I'm a huge advocate from both sides, all angles of just your words are seeds, and they're going to produce something. And I want to make sure that in my own life that they're there, so that obviously what I produce, is for others, for my kids, for my family, and all those kinds of things. And so, and let me land this plane here with you, dude. This is exactly why. I mean, I could talk at least another hour for sure. We would hang and kick it and chill. And this is why I brought you out, man, because you're straight shooting and you're giving guys things that is going to shift their life and perspective and mentally, emotionally. And I believe that there's a great future and a great hope for them. I think for you, Adam, I want to leave this here with you. And I want every single dad that's listening to pay attention to what Adam's about to say and share, because where can these guys find you? What's the next step for them? What would be best? Where could they find you?
Yeah, Adam Allred official across all the social media platforms. Come join the party. I try to respond when guys reach out to me. I used to be 100%. It's just harder and harder. There's less and less time, and there's more and more DMs. But I try to get back to guys. But yeah, come be a part of it. Come share your insights on any of the content I put out there. Everything I'm putting out there is an attempt to just share something that I think is important for another man to hear. That's what I'm trying. It's not always perfect. I don't always land it right. I don't, and I evolve. Like a lot of my opinions have evolved and changed over time as it should. It's a journey and it's a process, but anybody who wants to be a part of it, come check it out. I've also got a community of guys that I live coach with every single week. We do 2 calls. It's called Doughboy Nation. Doughboy is a spectrum of masculinity. On one end, you got the Pillsbury Doughboy that's harmless and pudgy, and you poke it in the stomach and it giggles. On the other hand, you had the Doughboys in World War One, with were these hard, badass mother effers that like were ready to die for God and country in the worst that worst of
Yeah.
conditions. Which type of Doughboy are you? That's kind of the whole thing with Doughboy. We get into the 7 different articles of masculinity, and we do a lot of training and coaching. But more importantly, even than that, it's a community of guys that just care about each other. So if you're looking for a community to come be part of, come check it out. But yeah, there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of other men's groups out there that are doing really dynamic, amazing things. There's so many of those things out there. There's really not an excuse for men right now to be isolated anymore, because
Yeah.
there's so much opportunity to connect. There's so many people like yourself, Anthony, that are getting the message out there. There's podcasts to listen to, dynamic people that are sharing wisdom, sharing the journey, their own journey and the journey of their guests. And then there's a lot of just groups. Men recognize, I think, that the biggest threat to masculinity is isolation. When
Yeah.
men get isolated, things start to go sideways. And when we can stay in a good group of guys that are leveling up, it really is where iron sharpens iron. So get in a group. It may take some courage. You may have to take a leap of faith, but get yourself surrounded by other good men, and you'll watch your life start to transform and change.
Love it, dude. Rock and roll, guys. Follow him. Find his community. Again, if this episode hits you, follow the show on Spotify or Apple right now. Share it with a dad. Come find us at Divorced Dads of America. The community is being built for men like you. Man, thank you, Adam, so much for just taking your time in here. And again, guys, if you want to change, you've got to change. Keep building, brothers. I'll see you guys on the next one. God bless you.